back this up a second. Everybody's looking for the get rich quick thing, right? Got $1,000. Where can I put $1,000 I'm gonna make $100,000? It doesn't work like that. Very, very rarely. You're gonna wanna build something with that money and then play what I call a game of doubles. You're gonna take this $1,000, invest it into yourself and some infrastructure, buy some tooling, buy some materials, and turn that $1,000 into $2,000. My buddy Mark dropped a comment and said, you need to tell people about the bricklayer and the jewel buyer, okay? So what he's talking about is making terrible decisions with your money and taking advice from people that are not knowledgeable in the area in which you are asking the advice. So one of my favorite books of all time is The Richest Man in Babylon. And this is a fancy version of it. I started off with a little pocket version and I absolutely fell in love with it immediately. And quite honestly, a lot of the principles within The Richest Man in Babylon are actually biblical principles, but that'll be a great conversation for another day. But you're gonna get a tremendous amount of help, not just spiritually, but financially in the Bible, believe that or not. I didn't even realize that until I dove into it pretty hard. That'll be a fun conversation for another day. But Mark was alluding to a part of the story where, I will read it here, I picked it up. It says, in The Richest Man in Babylon, a bricklayer, Asmur, went to Phoenicia to buy jewels. In the book, Arcad, a poor scribe who becomes wealthy, gives his money to a bricklayer named Asmur to invest in buying and reselling jewelry. Asmur travels to Phoenicia to buy the jewels, but is scammed by the Phoenicians and ends up with worthless stained glass. So that story highlights that the bricklayer did not know about jewels, and because he didn't know specifically about what he was tasked to purchase, he therefore was easily scammed. And so that's where, I've said it many times, obviously that one stuck with Mark as well, that in the book it says, do not buy jewels from the bricklayer. And later on in the book it goes into where his mentor comes back in after he's made his big mistake years later, and he says, do you still entrust your riches with bricklayers? And Arcad responds, I do, but only in ventures that involve bricks. So if he needs to know about buying or building bricks, he asks the bricklayer, but not in jewels. And we have to be very careful about who we take advice from, because too many people go ask their friends about business or investments who don't know any more than they do. So if you're asking somebody about a specific business venture and they're not in that business venture, you're probably going to get really bad advice. That also goes as far as investments. And we'll cover a little bit of investment stuff here in a minute once you have money, kind of knowing where to put it. But specifically, let's cover this topic first, which is if you're wanting to start a business, something like this channel is a great place to ask the questions, as opposed to going into your place of employment. Let's just say that you work at Walmart, you're stocking shelves, and then you're stocking shelves next to another guy, and you're like, how do you think, a guy could start his own business? And then the other guy's gonna say, oh, well, I think you should do this, and it's like a terrible idea. He doesn't have a business. Much like we ask our parents for advice on things that they honestly don't know how to do. And too often then we idolize somebody, even let's just say like a celebrity, and then take their opinion on something that they've never done. We see that with politics all the time, right? What on earth does a movie actor know about politics? Nothing. But we ask their advice and then listen to it. It's ridiculous. So don't take advice from people that aren't in the position that you want to be. So that's the first big key to not taking terrible advice. Only ask advice from the person that's in the position in which you want to be. And sometimes that's difficult, especially if it's in the same exact demographic. They probably aren't going to want to tell you exactly how to be in the same business to basically compete with them. So it's a very difficult thing to ask. A lot of times what you do is you find somebody else that's in some sort of a similar business that you're not competing with, and then seeing if they'll give you some information. But sometimes you're going to ask some of these people and they're not going to be very forthcoming, and they're probably not going to tell you. But you have to keep searching until you finally get a lot of the answers. Now, the good news is, now with this new day and age of YouTube and the internet, you can search it and you can find people that will give you advice. My only suggestion there is that we go back and think about the Instagram influencers, as we always called them, the charlatans that just take a picture on a boat, take a picture by a jet, stuff that's not even there, and they're lying to you and they're trying to sell you something. Okay, so no, you don't want to take advice from those people because they're not really there. Do the research and find exactly what it is you want to do, and whether it's that person or somebody fairly similar, do the research to make sure that they do know what they're talking about. And you'll figure that out pretty quick. If you start following a paper trail through social media, their YouTube, their Instagram, you're going to figure it out really fast if they actually know what they're talking about. At that point, I would say be a little bit skeptical about it and don't listen to the first thing that just comes down the pike. Do a little bit of research and then learn from that person what it is you want to know. Books, again, are a wonderful way to get that information. The other side of that would be something more advanced. Okay, so I hear this kind of stuff all the time where a new fad comes along. There's always a new fad every year, every couple of years, there's always a new investment fad. Okay, so people are like, okay, I got a little bit of money. If I had $1,000, where should I put it? And somebody's like, okay, well, I'm gonna open up a Robinhood account, or I'm gonna invest in crypto, or I'm gonna do this. And people seem to think that, okay, if I take that $1,000 and I put it there, then I'm gonna get money. And more times than not, you end up losing it. Now, if you get in early on something, you could possibly, okay, I kind of got in early, but every one of these things is a gamble. Realistically, every investment, it doesn't really matter what it is, even the safest investment is still a gamble at the end of the day. It's basically going to a casino. Some are safer than others, and then you're going to see some that have really hot trends. Okay, so something like Bitcoin as of lately has had massive returns, but you're going to have to be able to play that game, because if it does get to a point where if it ever falls on its face, you're going to lose it all. Okay, so too many people are just like, I'm going to ride it and let it keep going. We're riding on red. They could potentially lose everything. And what I've learned over time is if a specific investment, back this up a second. Everybody's looking for the get rich quick thing, right? Got $1,000. Where can I put $1,000? I'm going to make $100,000. It doesn't work like that. Very, very rarely. Typically, you're going to want to build something with that money and then play what I call a game of doubles. You're going to take this $1,000, invest it into yourself and some infrastructure, buy some tooling, buy some materials, and turn that $1,000 into $2,000. Law of doubles. You're going to take that $2,000 worth of stuff, you're going to tool up again, you're going to get some personal development, you're going to make some more product, you're going to turn that $2,000 into $4,000. And then as you get to where you start getting into the $50,000 and $100,000 range, it gets harder and harder to double, but you can still incrementally make huge climbs. Now, any investment that you're really going to run into, except for the I hit the lottery idea, which doesn't always work out, any investment that you put money in, it is a gamble, and they have low returns because they are open to the public. This is a little trick that I can tell you, and I'm not a licensed investor kind of guy, so I'm not giving you advice on all of that. I'm just giving you some of my experience. Is if you even take $50,000 and you put it into a money market account or something, let's just say you get a 5% return. How long does it have to sit there? You could do better things with that money to grow your own business, to grow your own portfolio. Now, when you get to the point that you've got a chunk of cash and you really don't have anywhere to put it, that is when you can invest that money and you're going to get that low return. And that low return's fine. Typically, your safer investments are going to have a much lower return. Anything that's got a very high spike return, there's also a very good chance that it's going to bait you into the spike, and then it's going to drop a little bit, and it's going to give you another spike, and then it's going to drop a little bit, and you're like, okay, we're going to wait for another spike, and it starts to go up, and then it falls flat on its face, and they make off with your money. That's how a lot of these work, okay? Not all of them, but typically. Now, there are some big companies that if you invested in over time, the stock has grown, and you might get dividends from that, and maybe you can cash out and sell your shares and get some money. But that's a fine place. It is a fine place to put cash when you have extra cash, because just having a lump sum of cash, putting it in the bank, is not, and just holding it there is not really a good thing to do with your cash, because it's going to lose its value through depreciation. So every time that the cost of living goes up, the value of the dollar is depreciated. Therefore, your $100 today is really worth like $95 next year. And after that, it's worth $90. And so you're just kind of losing value for the cash that you had, if that makes sense. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. We can cover that in another video. However, until you get to a point where you've got the cash, stop looking for a place to just stick money thinking that it's going to make you rich. Now, in the principles described in The Richest Man in Babylon, he specifically talks about making investments and using the money as little soldiers that go out and make more money for you. That's also a biblical practice in the law of the talents, or in the parable of the talents, where a wealthy man entrusts his slaves with a certain amount of money. A talent is an amount of money. It's not a parable of talents, not like I sing and dance and it's a talent. Just exchange the word talent for money. So he gave the one slave 5 talents, let's just say 5 gold pieces. He gave the next slave 2 gold pieces, and then finally gave the other slave 1 gold piece. And then he went away for a while. When he came back, the one slave that had 3, he said, I invested your money wisely. I took it to the money exchangers, and in the amount of time, here is your 3, and on top of it, it earned another 3. Same thing with the 2. He says, I invested it wisely. I got my 2. So now I give you your 2 back, and I'm giving you another 2. And then the other guy said, I know you worked really hard for this money, and I was afraid of losing it, so I buried it in the ground, but I'm going to run over and dig it up and bring it back. And the wealthy man, he's very angry with him, and he says, I entrusted you with this money to grow it, not to hide it and sit on it. Okay, but just the same, if you were to give that money to somebody that doesn't know what they're doing with it in general, they will take it to the gaming tables. And that is again discussed in The Richest Man in Babylon, how people will get a sum of money and they will take it to the gaming tables to try to get more money out of it. And that's what's happening when you start doing a lot of low-level investing. If you can't afford to lose that money, do not invest it. Typically, again, somebody starts off with $5,000 or $10,000, they're wanting to invest it, and they go put it in something, there's a very high likelihood that you will lose it. There's a very high likelihood. So only once you have built your business to a point that you have extra capital to spend, now I would say start putting that into other investments. And another biblical principle is invest in 6, yes 7, meaning to diversify your investments. That doesn't necessarily mean go start 7 different businesses. You might have 1 or 2 businesses, and that's one of your diversifications. Some of it is taking cash and putting it in a certain investment. But you put it into 6 or 7 because if you get 1 or 2 that fail, you still are offset by the other ones. And then as you learn and read the market and understand investments better, you invest, you will lose. You will lose. There is no such thing as investing in which you do not lose eventually. You will lose. But if you become smarter and smarter at it, then your investments will get better and better and you'll make better choices. But it's a fool, they say, that the person that takes all of their money and invests it in one thing. Because if that crashes, you lose everything. So somebody that's just saying, great example, Brian commented on my thing, he said, just buy Bitcoin and hold it. I totally get it. He's a big Bitcoin guy. That's not a gamble I'm willing to take. I'm going to diversify my investments. But also, if you're a guy just starting out and you don't have a lot of money, let's say you're 20 or 30 or 40 and made some poor decisions in the past, it would be terrible advice for me to say, okay, you finally got $1,000, go put it in Bitcoin and just sit on it. Because that's not giving you a return. You're hoping that at some point it's going to appreciate enough that you can get the money back. We don't know how long that's going to take, and you could lose that money. But instead of putting it in there and saying, okay, well, next year maybe I can take it back and I'll get $1,200 or $1,500. It's like you could have taken that, put it into a business to better a lot of different avenues, and you could have turned that into much more money. So it'd be like taking the 5 talents, using it wisely in your investments and turning 5 talents into 10 talents, playing the law of doubles. And then it starts to compound over time. The book, The Richest Man in Babylon, then talks about compounding interest. There's a whole chapter in there. It's a wonderful storybook, wonderful book. And it talks about investing your money then, but then giving it to the lender. So every time it gets its interest, you put it back to the lender and it accrues even more through compound interest. Great principles in that book. I highly recommend it, but too early on is where people make the mistake of investing. They just get a little bit of money and say, well, I just want my money to make me money, so I'm going to take the money that I got. And what ends up happening is, as we round this back to the front, is they end up getting that little bit of money and then they give it to a bricklayer to go buy jewels from the Phoenicians, and then they get scammed for little bits of pretty glass. They come back and realize they got scammed out of all their money because he didn't know what he was buying. He wasn't educated enough in jewels to make good purchases on jewels. Now, the next time he goes, very good chance he's going to know a lot better what a jewel is compared to a piece of glass. But just the same, the money was lost, and thus a lesson was learned, which is terribly important. But be very careful about who you take advice from, especially investment advice, and do not entrust your money to bricklayers to buy jewels. So that's it for the show today. If you enjoyed the content, if you gained something from it, you want to share it to somebody else that can also gain some value from it, I would greatly appreciate it, and we're going to catch you on the next show.